Well, hello everybody. What's up? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. And it's been quite a while since I made one, and I apologize, but at the same time, I have been streaming more often than not, and I've just been enjoying single player games. And as far as the XDefiant goes, there really hasn't been too much really to report other than the norm or something that I feel was worth making a video on up until now. As of just a few minutes ago, I was just kind of going through the motions of recording a commentary, and basically that discussion ended up leading to what I'm going to talk about in this video, because I think that this is actually a possibility that actually might happen, and it's a big deal, and it means more than what it appears on the surface. So let's get into it. So as of recently, we've been made aware, thanks to Twitter and Mark Rubin himself, that we had 2.5 million players or so that played the open beta for XDefiant. And this is excellent news, which means that with the Xbox Series consoles, PC, and PS5, we had a total of 2.5 million players that participated in the open beta. Now, these are really good numbers, which leads me to my point in this particular commentary. And my point is this. I think that secretly behind the scenes, that there is a possibility, okay, that they are going to legitimately try to get the last gen consoles to release at the same day as current gen. Now, so far, the team has been very transparent, very truthful. And originally with the 120 FPS, it was something that they said that they were going to try to get for launch, right? But they couldn't do for beta, but they got ahead of schedule in certain ways, and they were able to make it happen for the open beta. So if you played the open beta, and if you were on the newer consoles or on new PC, which everybody was playing on, obviously, then you had the option to play at 120 frames per second, right? Which is great because the closed beta was limited to 60, but they got ahead of schedule and yada, yada, yada. So I'm thinking to myself, what if they actually did get ahead of schedule again? What if this delay, right? What if this delay is secretly happening because of the fact that they're trying to get the last gen consoles to launch at the same exact time as the current gen consoles? And this makes absolute sense to me because obviously there's always these last minute bugs that they want to squash and all that kind of stuff. But if they were getting ahead of schedule in certain places, and if they only had the current consoles to work on and stuff like that, and all the proceedings that happen with all that stuff, when you think about it, with everything that they were able to accomplish from closed beta to open beta, and then obviously all the changes that they made during the open beta, right, during the very limited amount of time that they had in those 3 days, as well as, the week or so or however long it was for the closed beta, or 10 days or whatever it was, in terms of the things that they worked on and things that they implemented and stuff like that to make the experience even better for players. Well, I'm thinking to myself, especially since these guys know what they're doing. They're not a big team like a Call of Duty team, but at the same time, they are devs that were former Call of Duty devs, and they actually know what they're doing. It's not about quantity when it comes to this game. It's more about quality, and the quantity will end up coming later as the game releases and as there's more content coming out with the game, as well as all the features that the game is going to have post-launch and everything like that. So I have this hunch, and again, I could be wrong. I have this hunch that it very well may be a possibility that that's what they're trying to do. Because if there's one thing that these devs have already proven to us through their communication and the transparency for XDefiant, is that they do have the player's best interest at heart, and they do address things, and they do talk to people, whether you're somebody that's known or whether you're somebody that's unknown in the community, whether you're a content creator or not, whether you're a casual player, whether you're a non-casual player, whatever you are, right? Your feedback is being taken into consideration, and there's communication that's happening, which is great. And one of the things that these guys care about is they care about all the players, right? All the players that are interested in playing their game, whether they're on last gen or whether they're on new gen. Ultimately, they don't want anybody left behind. And I think that there was a possibility that they saw a window to where not only can they release on with smoothly, but there's also the possibility that they may release with every single console. So I mean, with every console including last gen. So I'm talking Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series consoles, PlayStation 5, and PC. So ultimately, basically, they're just adding 2 more consoles into the mix. Now, I know games are not exactly like they were back in the day, but remember Call of Duty Ghosts? When Call of Duty Ghosts came out, we were in the middle of this new console generation release era. So there was the 360 that they had to work on, the PS3, and let's see, the 360, the PS3, and then they also had to work on the PS4, the Xbox One, and of course there was also a PS4. So there was additional consoles that they had to worry about with Call of Duty Ghosts, and they were able to do it. And actually, the funny fact about that is that Mark Rubin was also the head of Call of Duty Ghosts at that time. So there was a lot to be done with that game. So I think that there might be a possibility that that's what they're trying to do yet again, honestly. And I personally think it would be great because again, like if the majority of players do not own current gen consoles yet, right? If the majority of a player base does not own the current gen consoles yet, in terms of PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, well, then that means that there may be a hell of a lot more than an additional 2.5 million players playing the game on release if you manage to release that game along with everybody else. And again, at the same time, even though they don't necessarily have to do that, which means that there's still a chance that they won't do that or they're not focused on that. Again, like I said, they care about the players, including the players that are on last gen. And they have the numbers, they have the details, they understand. And let's not forget, another reason why I have this hunch that just popped into my mind right now is that the closed beta was limited to 60 frames, right? Limited to 60 frames. So that is pretty much, if you think about it, that is the only limitation, if you think about it, that new consoles have in accordance to old consoles have compared to new consoles, right? I mean, they're only limited to 1080p 60 frames, but really that's all you need. But that's exactly what the limitations were on the closed beta as well. 1080 60. I don't know if you can go beyond 1080, I'm not sure. But ultimately, for the most part, the 60 frames is the biggest kicker here. So ultimately, if you think about it, as far as beta goes, well, that's kind of already been tested for last consoles. We were all limited on 60 in the closed beta. So I'm thinking maybe these guys had all the data they needed, and then they ended up getting ahead of schedule. And then in the open beta, they allowed us at 120 frames, which again allowed them to have additional data. So therefore, they actually have all the data they need of how the game would run at 60 and 120. And believe me, anybody who's playing multiplayer, they're probably going to choose 120 over 60, right? If they have the current gen consoles. But at first, when we didn't have a choice with that, well, we all played on 60. So we already had our experiences with 60, and the devs were able to get their ahead of schedule and go from there. So upon my hunch and upon what I just mentioned, I think that there's a legitimate chance that we might get the last gen consoles on launch. I, for one, even though I do own the last gen consoles in the form of a PS4, even though that is the case, I have to say that overall, I am very much excited if this ends up being the case for all the players that are just on last gen consoles. I'm excited for them because not only do they get to join the XDefiant community and make the game even more popular, but they also get to experience a good arcade first person shooter that we have not had in a very long time, and as well as the developers themselves that actually care about the player base and everyone in it. I know that the current gen consoles are priority according to what we've heard so far and what's been said. But with that being said, when you think about it, don't you think that what I'm saying kind of makes sense and that there's a possibility for this? Now, again, I'm not a developer. I'm just a content creator and a gamer who just enjoys these games and the genre, as well as single player games and everything else. And sometimes, of course, my excitement and my ideas could get the best of me. But in terms of what I mentioned, doesn't this make sense? Maybe somebody will see this and they might have a response that might be more experienced in this matter in terms of game development and everything else. But as far as I understand, with my limited knowledge of game development, from what I've seen through YouTube videos and the little details that I know, it as well as putting the bits and pieces together, it makes sense that some of this stuff could very well happen. And for a game, of course, like XDefiant, even though 2.5 plus million players is a good number, especially since they were anticipating a number that was way less than that, I for one would say that if they ended up doubling that number or significantly increasing that number from 2.5 to, like, let's say 3.5 or more, then that will only mean that the game will only be more successful. And there's no reason as to why they can't, really. So, because they already have the data, they've already had, it's not like they're adding in any additional content into the game in terms of what launch is concerned, because we already know what we're going to be getting at launch and we've already had it. So there's no pressure to create anything new in that department until after launch, right? I'm sure they've gotten a few things going as far as that's concerned, but for the most part, the base game is the primary concern because that's what they're going to launch with. So it's like, well, if you think about it, that does include the older consoles as well, doesn't it? So I, for one, am optimistic. I'm at least giving it a 50-50 chance that this may happen. So I personally think that there's room for excitement for this. And I want to know down in the comments section what you think. And I know that the gameplay in the background is Call of Duty, and I apologize, but I've been posting nothing but the same old XDefiant footage for like ever. So I didn't want to, I didn't want you guys to feel like you're watching the same exact thing. So I apologize about that. But yeah, but just because I've got some Call of Duty gameplay in the background, I want to say this. Modern Warfare 3 is doing it all wrong. That's all I'm gonna say. And perhaps if you guys want me to make a video addressing that and talking a little bit more in depth about that, I will gladly so. But with that being said, this pretty much concludes the video. And those are my thoughts. And I think it's something significant because I think it's something that is certainly a possibility to happen. And I hope it does. I want the last gen console players to be happy. I want even more players to play with and or against. And I want the experience to be as best as possible for all of us. So that way we all get to enjoy this game that is going to be very very good and transparent, made by developers that not only know what they're doing, but also that truly care about the player base. And it's something that we as arcade first-person shooter fans have not had for a very long time. So, and I would like all of us to experience that regardless of what platform we are on and whether it's this generation or the last generation. Bring it on, let us all unite, and let us all have fun. So with that being said, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.